I would like to welcome our listeners to another edition of iGlobenews Pods. Please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter. You can find all our podcasts on our website at www.iglobenews.org. Joining us for today's podcast is Maximilian Tayenthal, co-founder and co-CEO of N26. Together with your business partner and friend, Valentin Staff, you have created an incredible company. Your success story is still being written as N26 continues to be one of the fastest growing mobile banks in the world. Your vision was to empower people to live and bank at their own terms whenever and wherever they may be. Before starting N26, you worked for various leading consulting and financial firms. You hold a bachelor's and master's degree in economics and business administration from the University of Vienna, a master's degree in economics from the Community of European Management Schools, and a law degree from the University of Vienna. You are a CFA charter holder. Welcome, Max, to our studio, and thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we start the interview, let me briefly introduce N26 to our audience. Founded in 2013 as the first mobile bank, you launched the initial product in early 2015. 7 years after your initial launch, N26 has an impressive growth record. You employ more than 1,500 employees in 8 offices. Your website states, "Start loving your bank. Open your N26 account in 8 minutes." So far, more than 7 million customers have followed your advice. You are present in 25 markets, including Austria, Germany, Greece, Spain, the Netherlands, and the US. N26 has a full European banking license. With state-of-the-art technology and no branch network, N26 has redesigned banking for the 21st century. Your app is available on Android, iOS, and desktop. N26 has raised close to 800 million euros from the world's most established investors and is valued at $3.6 billion US, making it one of the most valuable German startups. Let me start by asking you some questions regarding your inspiration for N26 and why you chose Berlin. Could you maybe share with our listeners how you came up with the idea for the mobile smartphone bank? What makes it so unique and what sets you apart?
Yeah, let me. First of all, thanks for the kind introduction. Let me start by the question why we actually started something in the space. When we started to work on N26, I believed, and I still believe that this is true today, that financial services is the area most ready for disruption. When we looked at the space, we realized there was a massive shift in user behavior, a shift from offline. People used to go to the bank branch, to online. People did banking on the browser, to mobile. People started to do banking on their smartphones. And then we looked at the interfaces of the big European banks and beyond, and we realized that no one was actually providing a great digital user experience. No one was actually providing a product for young digital natives, for people that like to do banking on the smartphone. And then we looked at all the industries that had already been disrupted by new technologies, and we realized disruption was never coming from the incumbents. So it wasn't the big travel agencies that founded Booking. It wasn't the record labels that founded Spotify. It wasn't Blockbuster that founded Netflix. It wasn't the telecommunication companies that founded Skype, and so on and so on. And I don't believe it will really be, I don't believe it will be the big banks that really change the way how millions of people around the globe do their daily financial transactions. And that's why we founded N26. We actually saw the opportunity to disrupt an old industry, like an industry that was and is still dominated by super old-fashioned, slow, boring, little innovative players, namely the traditional banks. What sets N26 apart? Come to the second part of your question. We have a brutal focus on the customer, and we have a focus on the user experience. So it's really about how things work, like how do you open a bank account? How do you authorize a financial transaction? How do you get like an overview over your finances in a way, we are very close to our customers, and we also ask them, like, why do you choose N26? And the reasons that are standing out here is like, one, it's a digital user experience. How do things look like? how do things work. I think two is the cost. We can provide our products because we are an IT company. We are relying on a much more modern IT stack. We are like operating at a very different cost base, and we can pass on like good part of this cost advantage to our customers, so we can provide our product at a cheaper rate. And then the way how we're addressing the customer service, and also the brand we are building up, I think it's something that is very appealing to our customers.
Well, that definitely seems to be the case, considering your really explosive growth that you've had in the past years. What would you say were the major milestones in your startup, and when did you actually have your breakthrough, and where did your initial financing come from?
Yeah, I think about major milestones, what I, for me, call like the defining moments of N26. We founded a startup in 2013 in Vienna, and then for 1 month we were thinking about, should we move to London or should we move to Berlin? Like, I think in hindsight, we are very happy that we were moving to Berlin, which was not such an obvious choice back in the days, because like in 2013, London as a startup ecosystem, especially in the fintech space, was considerably bigger. So like founding the company, moving to Berlin, launching a product in 2015, were all defining moments. Very important also for us. We launched in January 2015, and then for the first 3 months, it was really about the proof of concept. It was about like answering the question, do customers really need our product? Do they like the user interface we are providing? And after 3 months, we actually decided we need to apply for our own banking license. Why did we do that? I said before, we entered that space because it was like dominated by these old-fashioned and slow players. And then suddenly we found ourselves in a setup where we had to team up with such a player. And then we realized, if you really want to disrupt this industry, you need to be in control of your own tech stack. We needed to build our own core banking systems, but it was also in terms of, time to market, in terms of the question, like who is owning the customer relationship in a way. It was like all like pointing in the direction. So like getting our bank license in 2016 and then migrating like our customers to our own banking platform was also a very important milestone. If I take out like perhaps 1 or 2 more important steps, N26, from the beginning, we had the vision to build a pan-European bank. So today, N26, we're the only ones that, based on 1 IT platform and 1 banking license, onboard customers all over Europe. That vision has become bigger lately. Today, we want to build the first global retail bank. In terms of building a global bank, you don't need to go to the 194 countries of this planet. But if you capture the European Union, plus the US, plus perhaps 6 or 7 other markets, you capture about 70% of the worldwide banking revenue potential. So this internationalization was definitely also a defining moment. And then, the various funding rounds, like from pre-seed to seed, Series A, B, C, D, and the various extensions was also extremely important, because you can build a startup one or the other way, I guess. My co-founder and myself, we decided very early, we don't want to sell N26 for a couple of million euros to some other bank, but we always had this vision to create first pan-European, then a global financial institution. And that also means you need a lot of time, invest a lot of work, and also need a lot of venture capital to fund that expansion. So raising capital from venture investors was also very important. And with growing valuation, we also saw growing opportunities to raise more venture capital. Each of these rounds I would also define as very important milestones in the history of this company.
Well, you definitely think very, very big. And it's truly amazing that this vision you had at the start has actually materialized, and it's incredibly inspiring. And so where do you see you moving from now? How's your company strategy today? Is there any market that you especially want to move into?
Yeah. I said before, there's 6 or 7 markets globally. You would have to enter some of the big financial like systems. I think the situation is quite similar in all the markets. It's dominated by the old school players. No one is really having access to good pricing. No customer really has access to a great user experience. But in reality, we're just scratching the surface in all the markets we're in. Like say, if you have 1 million customers in Germany, the question is, how can you get to 5 or 10 million? The same in France, the same in Italy, the same in Spain. In the US alone, you could build a company with 20, 30 million customers. And right now, for us, instead of, like launching, like as we did in the past, launching several markets like every year, it is really about winning the markets we are in. So we want to provide like more relevant products beyond like the financial offering we're having today, and want to reach like more and more customers by doing that.
Is there any cultural difference between the various markets you move in? Do you have to, or is it more like a cookie cutter system that you move from one market to the other and you use the same strategy for moving into every market? Or is, for instance, the US market different from the European market, different from the South American market?
Yeah, it is actually, it is an extremely fragmented market. Like it's fragmented like no other market. So you have like French banks for French customers, German banks for German customers, Italian banks, and so on. And that kind of history, which is very different when you compare it, for example, like with car manufacturing, also brought that there's like different habits when it comes to payment. In some of the markets, there's still like checks being used. In some of the markets, people are more likely to use cash. In others, they're more likely to use credit cards and so on. In reality, the European market in many ways is more homogeneous. Like it's also something that European Union takes very serious, when it comes, if you think of it from an EU perspective, what they're really religious about is to foster transnational competition. So like the European Union never liked it so much. Then when you're like studying, like you're doing your bachelor's in Paris, you're doing your master's in Milan, and then you're like working in Berlin, you actually needed to change your bank account like 3 times. So they like a lot when you think banking at the European scale. And they did a lot of, in the last years and decades, they did a lot of alignment of, if you think about like the SEPA region, and if you think about how KYC is working, they find the European like minimum standard, and then there's deviations. In fact, it's still quite complicated to operate even at European scale. Obviously, you have one license, you can passport, you have like one payment scheme you can work with, but it's still like, if you think I just mentioned KYC, the little differences in the various countries. If you think about consumer protection, the little differences. If you think about regulatory law, I think our legal department here is coordinating, 60, 70 different law firms throughout Europe. So not that easy. If you go like to the US or to Brazil or to other markets, this like almost meant like building N26 from scratch. So different card processor, different license. We are relying on different KYC modules. Like the front end to the customer is actually quite similar, but what you need to build in the back is pretty much different.
So when you say you have 8 office locations around the globe, you have those like head offices where you then would have your legal department in that head office and tech support in that head office, or who actually sits in these 8 offices, since you don't have any branches anywhere?
Yeah, we have, it's different. Like we have, our main offices are Berlin, and then we have Barcelona and Vienna, and then we also have New York City and Sao Paulo. So this is like offices where you have all kind of disciplines. So it's like mainly product and tech. In Berlin, obviously, also have like all the headquarter functions. Then we have a couple of smaller offices, like think about Paris, and there we have like, we have the country manager, we have like the PR, local marketing organization. We also have our AML. We have a couple of the regulatory functions, like if you're dealing with the French regulator, they want to call up like a French number, and then I want to talk to someone in French that is actually based in
France.
In France. Generally, N26 is, I would say, a European company and quite global by its mindset. So we have like 1,500 people on the team, and we have 85 different nationalities. Not even, I think, 3% of our people were born in Berlin. Not even 10% are German speakers. So it's a very international crowd. And in the end, it does not matter so much. Like I think everyone learned a lot, like in the last 2 years. We also like start to believe that it's not that important anymore where the people are sitting. There's like many ways to actually collaborate well together without being like all in the same place.
But it's nice to see you haven't forgotten your Austrian roots. I think you have a lot of Austrians also in your management, and you have a Vienna office, which is also really nice. So you're branching out. You just mentioned that into other areas. I read online that you're also branching out into electronic insurance coverage. So you, in the future, would like to help your customers with insurances for bikes, homes, pets, and more. Do you also do that yourself with your own insurance license, or are you going to use large insurances? What is the plan here?
Yeah, first, like for us, the anchor product, the base product was always like this free bank account. And then in terms of like becoming like in more and more areas, like a partner, like of our customers in financial matters, we're actually like entering different verticals, insurance being one of them. We, for the time being and for the foreseeable future, we're not underwriting ourselves. So we don't have an insurance license, but we are like, we are a broker in a way. So we are looking like what's the best offering in the market, and we are then selling that, brokering that to our customers.
Just a quick tangent. N26 has been in the news lately. The German regulator BaFin is putting pressure on N26 to increase the fight against money laundering. Could you maybe share with our audience what your organization is doing to counter the pressure by BaFin?
Yeah. First of all, the growing scrutiny and pressure from our regulators reflects like N26 growing influence as an increasingly like prominent player in the industry. What we fully acknowledge is you have to adhere by the rules of the game, and we started like as a startup company, and then as I told before, we got our own bank license. What we actually are doing, and N26 is taking the responsibilities very seriously, is we hired a lot of people with experience out of the space. We built up like a massive compliance function. We built up a massive AML function. We built up a massive fraud prevention team. We also believe, for example, take like fraud prevention. As we are like in user experience, I think many people will share that perspective. We are setting a standard in like how you provide a digital user experience. We also want to be technology leaders in terms of fraud prevention, for example. So I can just say there's a massive focus on the topics, and we will continue to work collaboratively with our supervisory authorities, and we will always show our commitment to deliver the highest standards also on this front.
Thank you for sharing that candid answer with me. I'd like to now move maybe to more of your future development, also regarding how you would like to finance your company in the future. N26 has raised close to 800 million euros from the world's most established investors. You've applied for a financial holding company license, which, as your website states, is a step towards public listing in the future. Could you maybe share with our audience how you envisage going forward? Do you want to go public? Do you have any ideas on which markets?
Yeah, we are very much convinced that we want to continue our expansion plan in the future. So N26 is not in the business at the moment to distribute dividends to our investors. So whatever we earn in cash flows from our operational business, but also like whatever we can raise at meaningful valuations, we're going to reinvest. We're going to reinvest into expansion of the business. So expansion of the team, expansion of the customer base, and expansion of the product. Now it's the question what's the most effective way to raise this capital. And so far, it has always been like raising venture capital, and the venture capital markets have proven to be extremely liquid. So you can like think about the Uber example, like for many years, this like Uber and other companies stayed private and were able to raise like billions and billions of dollars. Now we believe at one point in time, the most effective way to raise capital, plus also a proof, as we are like a B2C company, or the way to generate like even more trust with our customers, will be to go public. So we're currently laying the foundations from a compliance, from a governance, from a structural perspective, for future IPO, as we are preparing for it as an organization.
Do you have a timeline for that, or is that just in the far future?
We have not decided yet on what's the best point in time for an IPO, but I can say like in the next 12 months, N26 shall be ready from a structural perspective.
And do you intend to go public in the European market, in the US market, or are you going to do both at the same time?
Both possible. We have not yet decided on the market, but we will like structurally we set up ourselves that we can do both. We could do like the US, like from the accounting standards we're applying and so on. We could do the US, or we could do Europe.
Do I understand you correctly, or from the feeling of how passionate you are about your company, that you will still remain in your company and I don't intend to sell the majority portion of your company?
No, I think I want to stay with N26 as a shareholder. I very much believe in the future prospects of the company. I also very much enjoy still building the company, as long as I feel that I can generate, a lot of value, but as well also looking at it from a personal perspective. As long as I feel I'm like having this steep learning curve, like still being challenged by different situations, different questions every day, I plan to remain with the company.
Excellent. Maybe also taking that and moving forward, could you maybe share with our listeners what markets and business areas that N26 will focus on moving into the future? Are there any new projects you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, next on the roadmap is Brazil. So we have an office in Sao Paulo. I think 40 people there working towards the launch in the market by the end of this year, early next year. Whenever we looking at entering a new market, we're looking at a lot of different metrics, like size of the addressable market, accessibility of the market, competitive environment, regulatory environment, and so on and so on. And Brazil was really standing out. You have this oligopoly of just a couple of banks that are really charging unfair fees. You have 50 million people that are underbanked. And I personally find it extremely exciting. If you think about, in the markets we're in, if you're in Germany, very honestly, if you're like with Deutsche Bank and like I could take any other example, if you're with any bank and you're moving to N26, we obviously believe you will have a better user experience, you will charge less fees, you should hopefully have a better customer service, but this is not a life-changing experience. But if you think about Brazilian, 50 million Brazilian do not have any access like at fair rates to the financial system. If you provide these people like this access, like a free bank account, in terms of the impact you can have on people's life, in terms of the financial literacy you can provide, this is actually life-changing, and that I also find extremely appealing to move, like from the Western world into a more like developing country.
And of course, then the model you would implement there, you could use in many other developing countries. So that would also be, I would say, a steep learning curve for yourself. Has COVID impacted your business at all? Or if anything, brought more people, more customers towards you since everything moved into the internet?
Yeah, answering the question personally, I think we all learned a lot in the last years, and the ways of collaboration has changed significantly. But I am almost all the time I was in my office, and I still find the direct collaboration with other people most energizing. Now, if you look at the business, during COVID-19, we saw a massive impact, a negative impact on our growth rates and on our activity rates. Like if you think about March last year, like think about yourself, how often did you buy new clothes? How often did you go to the cinema? How many travels did you book? So it was just like far less spending on the market. There was far less customers being active. But if you think about the long-term development, and many people, I think, share the perspective that 18 months in COVID has really accelerated this trend to digitization that we've seen already for many years. And if you look today, how much of content is consumed digitally, or like how like people have changed their way like to purchase goods or like to consume services and so on, I think there was definitely a massive impact. And also like in the last year, there was probably less account openings. But if you would have opened an account, you would probably not have opened it in COVID-19 in the branches of some traditional banks, but you would have changed to a more modern online solution.
Do you think that there's a possibility you would move into the Russian or Chinese market?
Quite interesting market, and I talked about 6 or 7 markets you need to be present to capture the majority of the worldwide banking revenue potential. Russia and China being definitely some of them. They're not top of the list, like for various reasons. If you think about China, it's no question you would not have to compete with the 400 more traditional banks, but you have like massive digital players like Alibaba and Tencent, which is actually also one of our investors, that are like they have like both more than 1 billion customers and that are already like extremely present in the audience there. So it's not like how to enter the Chinese market, which on top is extremely protective, is actually not that obvious. So we will definitely launch some other markets before we actually face the challenges in China.
Yes, I can understand that. So turning to my last group of questions, being so incredibly successful as you are, and if you're one of the most successful German startups in history, and if since you're Austrian and your co-founder is also Austrian, you are certainly the most successful Austrian startup ever. What advice would you give other young entrepreneurs, and what is the secret to your success?
Thank you so much. First, I think like measured by where we want to get to, measured by the size of the ambition, measured by the size of the vision, we're actually very early still in the journey. But I think like if you want to give some advice, like first I want to encourage like everyone to try a career in startup. As you pointed out at the beginning of our session, I did all kind of stuff before, like strategy consulting. I was actually working as an M&A lawyer just before founding my startup. I was working corporate in between, and I can say that startup for me in literally any dimension is by far the most meaningful thing I've ever done. So if you think about the impact you can have on people's life, if you think about the steepness of your learning curve, if you think about the satisfaction to make your vision become reality, I find all these things extremely rewarding. So first of all, I would encourage everyone to try it out. When you're like a student, try out an internship in a highly scaling startup environment, or think about like what's the startup you want to find yourself. Think about the problem you want to solve that's really close to your heart, and think about whether this problem is big enough to justify a separate startup, because it's only a small problem. Like it might not justify, like you investing like all your time and energy in solving it. And if the problem is like too big, you might also not be able to solve it. Think about finding the best people possible, like that have a digital mindset. In any space you're competing with players that have so much more funding than you, so much more money, so much more resources, so much more people. And so I very much believe you have to hire the smartest people you can find. And it's also like everyone needs to work so much harder than the incumbents of the industry. I also think you should think about from the beginning on to build a scalable organization. A lot of what's if you want to call it success, a lot of the opportunities we're having today stems from the fact that we've built a very scalable structure, like a very scalable organization. So if I talk about scalability, I mean, it shouldn't matter if we sign up 50 customers tomorrow or 50,000 customers tomorrow. If it matters, we have not built our systems properly. And that's obviously something that sets us very much apart from traditional players in the industry. So when you start building a startup, think about how you can make it fit for million or millions of customers. I think fundraising, having access to venture capital is also quite an important one. Also think about the city you wanna go to. We moved to Berlin and London. I think by that time, for example, Vienna was not so much an option because everything was just so much smaller. But a couple of years later, we actually decided that we want to get back to Vienna, and we looked at all the things. Most important of it, obviously it's about also about accessibility of office space, how much is the cost of living. But the most important element for us, the most important driver is always what's the talent you can find in the city? Is the great technical universities? Are there people moving in that have the right mindset, have exactly this mindset to work in a startup? In Berlin, for example, I said extreme international team, but Berlin was so much hyped as the European startup capital that you have people from everywhere moving to Berlin that have this startup mindset, that have exactly the mindset you need for the people that work in your startup.
So you would say to startups today, maybe also young Austrians, that they could actually stay in Vienna and also achieve a success, and they wouldn't have to actually leave the country because the environment in Austria has become better. Would that be?
I think we have seen a massive development in the last years. Just in this year, GoStudent and Bitpanda actually became what we call unicorns. So they passed the 1 billion valuations threshold, which was unheard of. Before that, the biggest Austrian startups were significantly smaller than that. So I definitely see a massive development in the Vienna ecosystem.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this incredible insight. And as a pioneer, as an Austrian pioneer for startups, such a successful one, all your insights with our listeners and our audience. Thank you so much for coming on our show. And for our audience out there, if you enjoyed our show, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thank you very much, Max.